So welcome to our Everything Marketplaces workshop today, which is on marketplace payments and considerations for B2B marketplaces. So if this is your first workshop, welcome. And our community workshops are live member events where domain experts walk us through topics that are all relevant to us all as marketplace founders and teams here. They're 20 to 25-minute presentations followed by a group Q&A. So that said, I'm really excited to welcome the Routable team on to join us today, and they're going to walk us through payments considerations for B2B marketplaces, and then more specifically on payouts. So right before we let Waqas from Routable take over, I do want to mention, once again, that these are 20 to 25-minute presentations followed by the Q&A. So, if you have any questions, you can post them in the Zoom chat, and then just be sure to turn on your camera and also use the Zoom raise hand functionality. So that way I can call on you when we get to the Q&A. So with that said, Waqas, thanks again for taking the time and joining us here in advance, and definitely looking forward to this. So I'll just let you take over from here and maybe start with a brief intro.
Yeah, really excited to spend some time with you guys. Just in terms of intros, to kick things off, my name is Waqas. I'm a director of product here at Routable. Routable is, fundamentally it's a company that is helping businesses with their B2B payments. And what we found over time, and I'll talk a little bit more about this through the presentation, is B2B payments, and particularly in the marketplace concept, is just an amazing opportunity if done well, if you have the right approach and if you have the right solution at hand. It also can be quite challenging. And I think today what I'm hoping to do is to cover a little bit of both, right? So how you guys as marketplace founders might think about this space, potentially some of these problems and challenges that I'm sharing today will be, ones that you faced in certain ways. And I will obviously help you with hopefully a bit of a mental model of how you can think about solving this for your organization, for your company as you grow. So that's a little bit about me. I've been in sort of product roles for a long time, and yeah, really excited to spend some time with a great founder community today. All right. I'm going to get right into today's work. We're going to be talking about B2B marketplace payments. And like it says here on the slide, everything you need to know about handling payouts at scale, which is the idea of paying out folks that you're doing business with. Before I get into the content, I actually had a bit of a poll, and I don't know how to do Zoom polls. So just please, folks, work with me, humor me. Raise your hands, drop in a note in the chat. But my main question to everybody today, before we get started, is when you think about how payments works for your marketplace at this time, or you think ahead maybe in the next few months, how many of you feel confident and excited about how it works for you today? And those are two interesting words, potentially pretty loaded, but feel free to use emoji reactions, raise your hand. I'm just hoping to get a little bit of feedback here. How many of you feel confident and excited about payments and how it works for your organization today? All right. Not doing payments yet. That is a common one. Fair enough. A lot of questions. Thank you, Seth. Yes, I can totally imagine. Hopefully I can help with some of that today. What I'm hearing and looking at a couple of the emoji reactions, I think that's very telling, right? So, payments is a little bit of a challenging space. And I chose those words intentionally because when you think about confidence, for me, when we think about confidence, it's about two things. It's about making sure that payments is going to work for your business. It's efficient in how you scale. It's not the most expensive thing that you're pouring a ton of your investment in, that investment that could go in other places of building out your product and building out your community. And that you're doing things because it involves money, which can be really sensitive. You're doing things in a really compliant way. So for us, confidence is all about making sure your business is set up for success when it comes to payments. The second part of my question was about being excited about payments. Now, I'll admit, the term excitement is not normally associated with payments, right? In fact, payments is more normally associated with some sort of pain. Someone is having a problem somewhere, right? I didn't get my money on time. I don't know where the payment's at. What happened to my bill? I mistyped something. And so the idea of being excited about payments, to me, I think is a relatively new concept. But when we look at particularly the marketplace context and the idea of payments for marketplaces, what we feel and what we particularly see as an opportunity is, if you choose the right approach and you choose the right solution, you can actually build a really differentiated experience for your users, particularly folks on the demand side, on your supply side, that you might otherwise get ignored in many ways, right? So if you do this well, my promise to you, this group, is you can actually build a lot of confidence and a lot of excitement about payments. All right, let's get into it then. Cool. B2B payments for marketplaces. Why are we here today? We are here, my friends, because solving this problem is massive, and the business opportunity in front of us for when it comes to B2B marketplaces generally is massive, right? We looked at some research here. Essentially look at this slide as a lot of billions and a lot of trillions, right? But we estimate that the total size of B2B marketplace sales is going to grow to about $3.6 trillion by 2024, which would roughly represent a 5x growth just in the last sort of few years. If you think about B2B and B2C marketplaces combined, the numbers get up to be really, really big. We're talking about a $7 trillion sort of market. And that's one of the reasons why we're all here today, right? We're all building hopefully great marketplaces that can tap in and grow this pie even further, right? And deliver a ton of value to a lot of different stakeholders. The observation that we have is that there's a lot of tailwinds that are really important to think about when it comes to these numbers, right? And why these numbers tend to be growing. Everything from so many businesses, particularly through the pandemic, and as we're in the stage going from offline to online, right? And hopefully you guys are working with companies that are going through that transformation. They're becoming more and more digital. The digital transformation, as we talk about, many of I think the startups today that that you're running are also operating in sort of like the gig economy space. You're working with creators, maybe, right? You're working with everything from delivery drivers to to hosts to artists. It could be working with anyone really at this point. And the rise of this gig economy is also driving a lot of rise in the value of marketplaces more broadly. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I will say, when we as Routable, when we think about payments for marketplaces, we think this is a worthy problem to solve. Our founding team of Omri and Tom are both ex sort of founders. They built up marketplace startups themselves, and so they've firsthand seen a lot of these problems. It's actually one of the motivations for our origin story. So this is big, and hopefully, if we do this well, we can really, really help make marketplaces more successful more broadly. When it comes to payments more specifically, this is a very oversimplified view, but you have your buyers, you have your sellers. In some cases, you might have two-sided marketplaces or three-sided marketplaces. Just for simplicity, when it comes to the idea of payments and how that fits into this marketplace dynamic, we see a few things. Firstly, when you are, particularly when we talk about payments out to vendors and contractors and freelancers that you're working with, right? They're looking increasingly for a really seamless experience of being paid. Hopefully that resonates, right? We're all here in this group, consumers. We've all seen over the last few years how awesome the experience for consumer payments has become over time, the innovation that you see, how quick it is to pay people. I just need your email. In some cases, I don't even need that. I can, Venmo you some money. And a lot of what we're observing is similar kinds of expectations starting to move into the B2B context as well. So it's like, hey, if I can be paid easily and quickly as a consumer, why can't I be paid easily and quickly, even if I'm working with a business or as a business, or maybe I have a sole entrepreneurship, right? So that concept is really rising here. And so we're seeing that, that trend increase over time. We're seeing the demand for flexibility, for faster payments, for more options. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But B2B payments is also about, if you're moving a ton of money in and out of your organization, you also need a good amount of control and a good amount of oversight and a good amount of capabilities to support that kind of money and cash flow. So that ranges from things like enterprise level approvals, right? If you're a large enough organization, you might want to have different layers or tiers of oversight for payments that are moving out, particularly some of your larger payments, or at certain thresholds, the money becomes significant. You want to make sure that the right eyes are on that before you're moving money and making those payments out. It's also about invoicing and making sure that you understand where money is at any given point of time, making sure that you can optimize for the cost of payments. If you're making potentially hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of payments, those little fees could start to add up. And so overall, zooming out, when you talk about payments in the marketplace context, for us, it's about two different trends. It's about making sure you have the the right level of controls as a business around your cash flow. And it's also about adding an increasingly seamless experience for your users. And we think if you do that well, you'll actually be able to both be confident and excited about your potential here. I'm going to be talking about a few different terms, so feel free to please stop me and clarify some of this stuff. But these are new concepts potentially, and I think they're important ones for this group to hopefully, sort of think about and start to ponder on as you think about your payments. Even if you're an organization that hasn't started making payments just yet, that's totally fine. But these are kind of some concepts that might be helpful just to think about when you think about your future. Routable thinks a lot about mass payouts. And the idea here is that many organizations and many marketplaces will typically start with payments as a fully manual process. Like, what does a payment look like? It really is like logging into your bank portal, clicking a couple of buttons, paying, the folks that you're doing business with, your vendors and suppliers. And it's relatively simple in many cases, and often cases it's actually relatively intuitive. But what we've observed is that as you start to go from a handful of payments on a monthly basis to maybe like 50 to 100 to a few hundred, what you start to reach is a bit of a tipping point where things start to get more complex. More people are involved, both internally and externally. You start to have more vendors asking for different things. You might have some of those people in different areas of the globe. And so you start to think about, considerations around payments, moving money across borders. So there's a lot of stuff that starts to break down in your existing process as you go into a few hundred payments a month. And you can imagine as that grows and as your marketplace is growing, and you go from hundreds to thousands of payments, those processes start to break down again. And so for us, mass payouts is essentially representing that tipping point where you're doing enough payments as a marketplace where a manual process may not work for you as well as it could before. And you need some level of potentially automation. You also need some level of standardization in your process. Important thing to consider for everyone here is, I talk about marketplaces more generally, but at the end of the day, you are the owner of your domain. You understand your business and your space as well as anyone. You could be talking, you could run into a few different scenarios when it comes to payments and making payments out to businesses that you're doing business with. For example, you're a two-sided marketplace. You're working with potentially gig economy workers. You might also be working with, vendors like for your software needs, or a creative agency that's helping you with, compiling with marketing and branding and getting your name out there in the space. And so when you think about payments to these different personas, the payment needs for those organizations can be quite different. And one thing that you'll start to realize as you're evaluating potential solutions to payments is that, many organizations are built around a much more traditional use case than what marketplaces tend to have. Think about it this way. Traditional B2B payments is about facilitating like payments to the paper company. I order a certain amount of paper, I print some stuff out, I need to pay the paper company. Maybe it's Dunder Mifflin or someone else, right? And I think in the marketplace context, the who you're paying out to component is completely different. And the kind of experience that you want to offer to them is, again, kind of different. So you want to make sure that you really understand your use case and how different types of users are going to ask for different kinds of needs for payments. So you need to build something that's extensible. That's piece number 2. Piece number 3 here is, and I think this is really important. I think a couple of folks mentioned that they are just getting started around payments today. And so, that's totally fine. What we see is scaling out payouts. Scaling payouts is a journey. But if you're working on a marketplace that's growing rapidly, that journey can be quite accelerated as well. So definitely advise folks, like if you haven't already, and I think honestly, you being here today with me is a representation that is something that is on your mind. Definitely start to think about your North Star for scalable payouts, right? And how it can enable a really great experience for your marketplace users, while also thinking about how you want to scale from a business unit economics perspective. And as we mentioned before, compliance, because if you're moving a ton of money out of your organization, you want your finance team, whether that's in-house or you're working with an external accounting firm, to be happy with you. So that's my pitch. Hopefully this resonates for the group here today. And it's a big thing and it's an important problem to solve. Given that, I think it's important to also share a little bit of what we believe to be a great experience? I've used this term a couple of times. What is a great experience for payouts? And I think just to align us on what that might look like, we think about it very simply in 3 different steps. There's a part of the process at the beginning, which is about billing. Ultimately, this is all about understanding, how much do you owe your users for what goods, services, sales, et cetera, they've provided over a certain pay period. So, what are you paying for? How much you're paying over what period of time? That is essentially billing or invoicing, and that's the start of the process. The second once you have that figured out, the second part of the process is making sure that you're making some good informed decisions about how to pay those users, to make sure that you have information available to be able to pay them, and that they've been able to successfully onboard and provide their bank details and all of that good stuff. And if you've done both of those steps well, the third step of the process is reconciling. And ultimately, it's about, I knew I owed a certain amount of money for a certain kind of service, I made a payment, and I could square those two. And if you can do that once, you can do that twice, you can do that N times repeatedly. And that, to me, is the fundamental journey of payments and payouts in particular. But each of these things is actually deceptively complex. So I'm going to talk a little bit about considerations that you might need to account for as you think about billing, payments, and reconciliation. First, when it comes to billing, your bills and invoices can be all over the place, right? So to my earlier example, if you're working with an agency, maybe they're emailing you a PDF. At some point in time, it's in the middle of like 10,000 emails in your inbox, and you're like, oh, I know it's somewhere, right? That's piece one. You might have built like a system in-house to track sales on your marketplace, right? And to track, who's doing business over what period of time, when do you want to make payments? And so those systems need to also work really well with your payments infrastructure. And so the idea of scanning or importing or integrating bills is a big concept. And just keep in mind that your bills and invoices can be all over the place. And it's important as an initial step to get that into one view, to be able to organize and actually have a holistic understanding of how much you owe as an organization for those different use cases.
Hey, Wakas, if you don't mind if I can jump in really quick here. Hey, would you mind giving us like a simplified example of this? So for instance, maybe like a B2B kind of services marketplace or products and goods?
Oh yeah, for sure. So, if you think about a couple of examples that might be, I'll actually give you a real example for a company that we work with, which I'll be talking about later, called Garmentory. But Garmentory is a two-sided marketplace. They work with independent boutique designers on one side, and they're helping them connect with consumers all over the globe for really awesome apparel and clothing and whatnot. And they have a marketplace where they're working with about 1,000 different contractors and sometimes individuals, right? Individual designers, sometimes boutique shops. They're all over the world. And when you're thinking about billing for them, a lot of it is they've actually built their own in-house system to support kind of invoicing and tallying and making sure that they're keeping track of all of those transactions over a period of a month. And then they have a certain fixed window where they're making those payments. And so the example here would be, they need to make sure that that billing system that they built, whether that's in-house or whether that's something that they're using third party, can connect seamlessly to their payment system, right? And so they're using Routable in this case. And I think making sure that you can get all of your bills in one place is really important. But as an organization, they're also doing business with a bunch of different traditional sort of suppliers and agencies and other contractors, right? And think about it, everyone here is using a bunch of different tools and solutions to just grow your business. So when you're making those vendor payouts, those bills can be in your inbox. They could be, on a storage somewhere. You might have to log into a portal to pull it. So my point here is that your bills can be all over the place. And I think it's important when you think about a payout solution to make sure that you can get everything into one place so that ultimately as an organization, how much do I owe at any given point of time across all of my bills and invoices? Does that help, Mike?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. I'll quickly touch on the next pieces here, but getting things in one place is step one. But once you have all of your bills in one place, it's also really important to make sure, particularly if you're growing your organization, that you're figuring out a way to coordinate activities within different teams, ranging from operations to finance to maybe their support team that is working with their sellers on an ongoing basis to make sure that they have all of the information that they need to facilitate those payments and ultimately make sure that the amounts are correct, that they need to be approved by the right people. Maybe you are leading the organization. You have, you want to make sure that amounts up to a certain threshold are something that you personally review. And so approval rules and intra-team communication is also a really important part of this billing process. And again, like my earlier point, if you do this as a leader of a company that's hopefully growing really quickly, you want to make sure that that process is repeatable, and that as new people join the team or folks leave the team, that your process is not changing with you. So we often refer to that at Routable as workflow automation, right? So figure out a playbook that works for you around how you code and ultimately get your bills to a state where they're ready to be paid, and then try to automate that as much as possible. And I think when you're evaluating solutions, it's important to make sure that you're thinking through all of these considerations. So again, billing as a concept, deceptively simple, but there's a lot of different pieces that you need to think through. And that's very similar when it comes to payments, right? And with payments, I think hopefully this is something that we all sort of intuitively understand, but there's lots of different options now to move money and to pay your vendors. And what you'll start to find is, businesses traditionally will start with ACH, which is essentially bank transfers. When you start to work with vendors and businesses overseas, you'll start to learn about things like currencies and conversion rates and what is a SWIFT payment and all of this fun stuff that you never thought you'd need to learn about. But there's a lot of different options there. We're seeing an increasing trend where contractors in particular are looking for alternative ways to be paid really quickly. So real-time payments is a growing concept even for B2B use cases, as well as payments maybe to like digital wallets. Like, hey, I want to be paid in my PayPal account, in my PayPal wallet, because that's the easiest option for me in terms of where I spend my money, potentially or my business spends money. Virtual cards, debit cards. So the options in terms of how your vendors want to be paid are starting to grow. And each of these options have varying trade-offs involved when it comes to speed of payment, how quick the money actually reaches your vendor, as well as the cost of payments, which is obviously an important consideration. And when you're building a marketplace, you want to be really careful about managing your take rate and making sure your unit economics are scalable. So making informed decisions about all of these different options is critical. And making sure that you're also factoring in your vendor's experience of being onboarded and also, sharing their preferences with you is also a really critical piece here. So what we typically find is it's a really painful process to be set up to be paid in most business contexts. And so you're looking for as easy an experience as possible, and then the optionality for you and for the people that you're doing business with to make sure that payments are happening the way you want it to. Last thing I'll say is if you're starting to pay thousands and thousands of vendors, people are coming onto your marketplace all the time, fraud prevention becomes a big thing over time as well. So you want to make sure that you have confidence that you've vetted every business and individual that you're bringing on board to your platform before you're making payments. So again, simple concept, right? I just need to pay. There's a lot of different pieces to consider. And then finally, we were talking about reconciliation. If you're a growing marketplace, you might have a finance team or your CFO at a certain stage might tell you you need an accounting software. You need to make sure that we're able to close our books on time every month, every quarter, every year, and everything is compliant. Again, talking about this concept of moving a ton of money in and out of your organization. So whether you're using a software like QuickBooks Online, whether you're using something like NetSuite, you want to make sure that your billing and payment systems are working really, really well with that. And for us as Routable, what we've observed is that real-time two-way synchronization is what you really want to consider. The idea is, the synchronization is not a one-time activity. It can be quite messy if done at intervals. And so you want to make sure your systems are constantly talking to each other and making sure that if changes are being made, payments are being made, they're all being recorded in your accounting software and vice versa. If your finance team is making changes in NetSuite or in QuickBooks or Xero or Sage, that's represented in your payments infrastructure as well. Important consideration as well when it comes to reconciliation is you want to make sure for all of the payments that you made over a period of time, you want to come tax season, come the end of the year, You want to make sure you have all of the information that you need to create your tax documents and file what you need to with your vendors, with your contractors, as well as with the IRS. So there's a lot involved here when it comes to reconciliation after the fact. And again, going back to our original framing, really simple process, right? Really simple customer experience, but behind the scenes, there's a lot of complexity. And as a result, it's not a surprise that when we talk to marketplace companies, there are some stumbles that folks run into. So what I'm going to share next is sort of a few examples of the kind of pain points that we've seen are very typical. As I'm going through this, folks, please feel free to jump in, drop a comment if you've run into any of these kinds of challenges yourselves, what resonates, or maybe anything that it can help clarify. Mike, does that sound good?
Yep.
Alrighty, awesome. Cool. All right, so what are some of those challenges for a high growth marketplace doing mass payouts? First of all, if you have a small AP team, which is an accounts payable team, a team that's responsible for your payouts, it might be a formal AP team, it might be an informal AP team, you're gonna find that they're very quickly over time getting weighed down. And the burden of that manual process of billing, tracking bills, making payments, and reconciling starts to add up over time, and this becomes very, very expensive. So you can imagine, the kinds of issues that you might run into is small AP team trying to scale your business, struggling with that. They're missing some bills, missing some payments. They're not making the payments on time. Basic typos and mistakes in the process can add multiple business days or multiple weeks even to your overall process of supporting your sellers as well as closing your books. And so, from our research, what we found is if you build and use the right mass payout solution, you can actually reduce this manual lift, right? The productivity hit by 70%. It's very massive, right? You think about just where you want to spend your human capital as an organization, your marketplace. You want payments to be as efficient as possible. The opposite of that, unfortunately, is a really burdened AP team that is not able to keep up with the business. And so it's really unfortunate problem, but we do see this. And oftentimes this happens when you started with a manual process of payouts and your business scaled really, really quickly, maybe too quickly for your AP team. Additionally, and really important, is we talk about the vendor's experience, right? Your seller's experience of being paid. A lot of the legacy systems and AP solutions out there are not necessarily either designed with transparency in mind or providing a really friction-free process of onboarding your vendor. So, just being set up to be paid can be a bit of a pain for them, and it can take quite a bit of time, maybe a bunch of back and forth, lack of communications in a central way. So this is obviously a big problem. And if you let this, the vendor experience suffer over time, that can lead to vendor churn, which can be really, really impactful, cause a leaky bucket situation that you really want to avoid. And so when we think about the vendor experience, it starts from onboarding of them, making sure that they have access to a portal or an experience that you built for them that is branded in your marketplace, gives them confidence that they're entering their data, and in some cases they're very sensitive data like bank information, into a safe, secure interface, and that they're ready to be paid. And then as you're making payments, they have full transparency to when the money is going to reach their account. That's a very important consideration, again, over the long term as you're scaling out. We talked about this idea of lots of different pieces that need to come together, systems that need to talk to each other, ranging from your billing to your payment systems to your accounting systems. Bringing all of these pieces together is going to be increasingly critical as you grow your business, right? As you grow your marketplace. When systems don't talk to each other, humans have to help bridge those gaps. And again, similar to my earlier point, this is unfortunately an area where you can start to really increase the amount of time and effort and human labor into a problem that should be more automated, right? So again, I'm hopefully speaking to an audience here today that's partial to this concept, but systems don't typically work together. And so it takes some effort and thought and intentionality to make them work together in the space of payments and reconciliation. And then, again, it's just a similar theme here, right? Is if you haven't built for flexibility and extensibility over time, a lot of times that will lead to a confusion and a kind of broken ability to meet your vendor needs on both sides, right? So you have parts of your team, maybe that are spending their entire days supporting your vendors, your sellers on the platform, right? Do they have the information and tools needed to provide full visibility to your vendors and what's happening? Are you able to approve payments on time with the right information, with the right level of access in the organization? And are you able to control and customize that to your workflow, to your organizational needs? Again, thinking about how your needs will change over time is really important so that you can pick a system that will grow with you. And finally, for organizations that are moving tons of money and you want to increase the maturity of your finance process, of your accounting process, right? The ability to close your books on time. This is just so critical to get right at an early stage before you're moving that amount of money, because the sensitivity when you're in the end of the month and your finance team is really trying to figure out and square everything away, it could be a really painful process if you haven't done the work up front to get all of that data into your accounting software in a consistent format and fashion. A couple of data points just to help make that case. What we're seeing is like roughly 25% of companies that we talk to need 10 or more business days to close their books every month, and that's crazy, right? That's 30% of your productive time closing your books. And that adds up because you're doing the month-end close, you're doing a quarter close, you're doing a year-end close. And each time you're adding and it's compounding. And this is, again, a cost of human capital that you really want to be spending in other places to help differentiate your product and your platform. And more importantly, if you're not able to do this well and consistently, you really don't have a good handle or oversight of your cash flow. And again, when we look at small businesses, the vast majority of them, 82%, we believe fail due to inefficient cash flow management. So it's a huge problem if you don't do this well. AP automation and then making sure that you're able to close your books in a really efficient and sort of simple manner is just so critical as you grow. So lots of different problems here and lots of different challenges, and hopefully it kind of resonates for the group on how thinking ahead and planning ahead for mass payouts is a really awesome opportunity to build that confidence. And remember, we talked about excitement, building a really great experience for your sellers, right? That's what we're looking for. So I promise you to this group, I do not just bring problems. I do bring some thinking about how you might solve them. And like I said before, my job here today was to hopefully educate and help with thinking about a mental model. What are some considerations for you when you're evaluating an AP solution, a payout solution, whether you want to build that internally, whether you're looking at third-party providers, and there's so many sort of systems out there that you could potentially use. What are some key considerations that I can leave you with? And I'm going to say a couple of things. I'm going to try to go quickly here. But the first and most important thing is you have an existing workflow and business process as an organization, whether you're a very small team, maybe you're a team of 2 or 3 people, or you're a team of 10 or 100, it doesn't matter. But you have a process around how you get your bills, you get everything in order, you organize all of your transactions, and you ultimately want to transfer and transition into the payment state. So having something that works for your workflows, both today, tomorrow, and a year out, is really, really important. Think about approvals. Think about making sure you understand where all of your bills are, so that you can pull into one place. And whether your organization is ready at this stage or not to automate payments, or whether you're looking for a no or low code solution to help you with those payments, look for a solution that gives you that flexibility, because that's how you can grow with time. And as you can imagine, these processes get more intricate over time as your organization grows and your business grows. So make sure that you're thinking about workflows over time, but you can integrate today and grow with your payment solution over time. This here is a couple of examples of what we're talking about. So the first, these are products that I'm super proud of. The product team at Routable is really, really proud of. The first piece here is, if you're, again, making a ton of payments out, potentially hundreds of thousands of payments, you want to make sure that you are able to summarize them all in one place. You're able to see exactly what the invoices look like, when they're going to send, when they're scheduled to send. You want to make sure that your accounting system is integrated so that all of these payments are automatically moving. You don't have to spend any manual lift to move that. And potentially, you're working with different implementations or maybe even different subsidiaries as your company is growing. And so the ability to swap between those implementations and get a really bird's eye view easily of all of your bills and payments is critical. That's my main point, my main takeaway. I really think it's critical to start planning ahead. The second piece, which is if you really want to build that differentiated vendor, seller, contractor experience, start thinking about the entire process. Think about how you're going to want to collect banking information, tax information, information about the business that's ultimately going to show up on a 1099 or a W-9 or a W-8 form at the end of the year. Make sure that you have some thought towards how you want to streamline communication with your vendors, how you want to understand what their preferences are in terms of how they want to be paid, how many of them really care about payment speed versus cost, and that you're thinking through those trade-offs. And when you're building an experience, make sure that the experience that they're seeing is something that you want to stand behind and that gives them confidence, right? It's branded exactly as you want it to be. We've all maybe been in that situation where we maybe have been paid by someone and it's like, where did this random email come from? Like, who is asking me for my bank information? This looks kind of fraudulent. That is the kind of experience you want to avoid, right? You want to make sure that it's really legit and it's really core to your experience. So vendor onboarding and communication is a big ongoing thing to think through. The next piece of this is making sure that payments is going to grow over time. Your needs for payments are going to grow. So having flexibility in terms of all of the payment options, both domestically, cross-border, all of the stuff, making sure you have transparency into how much those different payment forms of payment might cost you, depending on how much money you're moving out, transparency to where money is at so you can support your sellers really easily. Again, that's really important. And what we're really trying to say here is that consumer-like experience for payments that we all love and we're used to now, we want to bring that more and more into the B2B case, particularly for a really great marketplace, to be able to make good, informed decisions. And lastly, but obviously as important as anything else, is think about security, think about compliance, make sure that you've thought through all of the considerations, right? SOC 2 is really important, PCI is really important. When we're talking about moving money, there's a lot of sensitive information that it might be involved. And so you want a really great solution that gives you that confidence and that compliance out of the box. And that for us is really, in a nutshell, what you need to think about as you're thinking about scaling Payouts as a marketplace. I hope that helps. And I hope that at least, again, my job here today wasn't to say, here's a solution, all of your problems are solved overnight. It's more about thinking about a mental model and a framework for how can I make a good decision for my organization. Last couple of things I just want to touch on is, when it comes to Routable, we're really passionate, like I mentioned, about marketplaces and how we can help make your business grow with confidence and excitement about payments. That's what we're all about. We think about this day in, day night. And we're always looking at ways that we can save that effort, right? Which is also a really important piece when you think about scaling. Effort in terms of reconciliation, effort in terms of the repeated tasks to manage your bills, to manage your payments. And ultimately reducing that to us is critical to our value prop. Hopefully, this is something that is useful or interesting for you. We work with awesome marketplaces. I was talking about Garmentor earlier, who have leveraged us in various ways to help their businesses grow. A company like Garmentor, like I was mentioning, they have a really awesome seller base that they're consistently doing business with. It's consistently growing. They're now fully global as well. And so when they came to us, they were talking to us about the pain of having to do things manually, and more specifically, right, this idea of getting their invoicing and their payments and then squaring those together in a manual way. They wanted to replace that. That's not where they wanted to invest their resourcing. And so they leveraged the Routable API to fully automate that process. We expect that saves them, upwards of 90 hours a month at this stage. And that number continues to grow as their business grows. So we've had an amazing time working with Sunil and the team over there. The same with Seated. We talked to David, who's the CEO founder at Seated, and Seated, just for context, is a ticketing company. So it's a really cool idea, right? Like they work with artists and they work with their fans, and they're facilitating these really awesome, like impromptu, sometimes live events you want to get tickets to the show that's in your town. Like, let's make that happen as seamlessly as possible. And what they were struggling with was just a ton of PDFs all over the place, right, in various inboxes, and manually taking that and entering that information into the payout system, that just to get to a position where they can start to pay was the pain point that they came to us with. And again, they worked with us. They integrated really easily with our API to fully automate that process and get all of that information easily and efficiently into Routable, and ultimately make those payments really quickly as well. That's saving them 60 plus hours a month. So again, these numbers tend to grow. And I think for everyone in this group, think about the compound value if you solve this problem well. That's my pitch. That's my, I guess, like parting thought here is, if this all sounds interesting, feel free to talk to us, and we'll be happy to connect you with our teams.
Awesome.
I think that's all I had. Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
No, this is really great. So thanks for kind of walking us through this. So a lot of great kind of insights too on this. So we're going to jump into questions here. I do have a few questions, but I'll let some that joined here kind of come on. Hey, Seth, do you want to jump on?
Thank you so much. That was very insightful and helpful to hear your perspective. My, I guess, quick background is more on the evaluation side. So looking at B2B marketplaces from an investment standpoint, trying to better understand, what differentiates Routable most from Melio and Tipulti and other like accounts payable mass payment solutions out there. Why would a certain marketplace come and choose Routable opposed to some of these other alternatives that have grown and done very well?
Man, you're going to give them the hard question first.
I stand prepared. No worries. So I think that's a great question. And let me sort of start with maybe a couple of points about when we looked at some of those numbers up front, right? We were talking about just the growth of marketplaces, the growth of B2B payments, more broadly speaking. Routable, definitely, we see a role that we can play in helping to grow that business, right? And to help marketplaces like, everyone we're talking about here today grow as well. But for sure, there's a lot of different solutions out there, I think, to your point. So when we think about differentiation, for us, it comes in a few different ways. And hopefully, Seth, let me know if this helps answer the question. I think a key point that I was trying to get across today is that when you're picking an AP solution, you want to make sure that it's a solution that will scale with you as you grow your organization. And there is such a thing as having too much engineering up at too early a stage, maybe not enough engineering at a later stage, right, as you're growing. And so a key point for us is around flexibility and control, and allowing you to work with Routable in various ways over time. So let me sort of expand on that a little bit. Today with Routable, we allow 3 or 4 different ways for our clients to make payments. We have our, a manual flow, a Routable dashboard that's really seamless and very intuitive, easy to use, kind of get all your information visually there before you make your payments. What we found is there's a lot of companies, and particularly marketplaces, that will grow their business really quickly. So the number of payouts that they're doing actually goes from a handful to hundreds to thousands, and yet they're not ready at that stage to put a really robust engineering investment, right, to be able to automate that process fully with our API. And so what we wanted to do to help with that was we introduced a CSV upload flow. And so it's still a way that your team can, in a reliable way, in a repeatable way, get a ton of payments, hundreds of or thousands of payments going in at one time. But you don't need a full-blown engineering implementation to get that going, right? However, we also have a Routable API that you can use. And so for us, it's really important to give you the flexibility to choose the way that you want to pay at your stage of company. And I'm not saying that other companies that you talk to are all great companies. They all have different, perspectives at this space. But for us, this is something that we've really thought through from our day one. Our team, like I mentioned, our founders, Omri and Tom, they've built payments in-house for their marketplace companies prior to Routable, and they both felt that flexibility was a huge gap against some of our sort of incumbent solutions at the time, right? So being able to pick and choose how you want to pay over time is a really important piece of this. I think the other theme that is really important to emphasize, particularly for our marketplaces, when you're working with your sellers, your vendors, these are your users. And you really want to build, I would assume, an amazing experience for them, just like you want to build an amazing experience for your consumers potentially on your marketplace, right? For your supply side and for your demand side. And I think it's very important. Again, what Routable has done is we've tried to help facilitate that process of having a great vendor experience and also giving you the tools that you need to build your own vendor flow, onboarding, communications wise. Again, we're trying to make that as seamless as possible. And we're trying to get out of the way of that interaction, because ultimately you are working with your vendors. You want that to be as transparent and seamless as possible. So, for example, your sellers do not have to create accounts with Routable logins and passwords and stuff like that to be paid. When they get an email or an invitation to add their bank details or tax details, what have you, Routable is really out of the picture in some ways. We're emphasizing your branding, your colors, and all of the communication as well, making that as customizable as possible. So for us, when we think about how to do this well, it really comes down to flexibility and different options to allow you to scale over time, as well as a really awesome experience for both your internal users who are working around payments, as well as your partners and vendors that you're working with. That is what's big for us. I think those companies that you're talking about are fantastic and they're good at doing certain parts of it. But that's our thesis, and we think that's really important, particularly for marketplaces to sort of think through as they're evaluating. Does that help, Seth? I don't know if did that kind of address the question?
Yeah, that does. So my understanding, it being a white label solution where you can include all of your branding, marketing in one place, make it easy, and then just really fitting the needs of where that marketplace business is at.
Exactly.
Still small or huge, you can kind of match both of those. And maybe a follow-up, if I can ask.
For sure.
I think traditionally, these payment solutions have been traditional SaaS, where you're paying a monthly fee, where it may fit or may not. You may be overpaying for features you're not using. Are you seeing a change in that? Or, if I have my own B2B marketplace, am I considering, what's potentially more attractive? Is it a, per payout type model per usage, or is it still just, hey, here's the monthly fee? And how does that change, or where do you see that perhaps changing in the future?
So that's a great question, right? And I think it's sort of about the historical pricing models that you might see versus maybe some of the more newer ones. What we're finding, and this is not necessarily a comment that's specific to any company, but I think your question was more about some of the trends. You're right. I think a lot of the start of this process has been very classic SaaS pricing is what you typically see. And that is certainly a component, right? Because as your company is growing, your needs around an AP solution might grow as well. Maybe you're starting to leverage, some more complex functionality. And so there is a component to that is SaaS. But I think to your point, it's not the only component. And we're increasingly seeing companies from a pricing perspective also think about, hey, how can we align incentives across the AP solution, the client that is growing its business over time, as well as in many cases, the people they're paying out to. And that's really important from in the marketplace context as well. So yes, you are starting to see, kind of an increase in transaction fees or revenue that AP solutions are looking to kind of tap into as part of facilitating the payment as well. There's obviously a cost to making those payments, and that's kind of one piece that you want to capture in terms of pricing. But kind of stepping out, I think a lot of it is around pricing models in this space are going to be some sort of combination, typically of your SaaS model as well as your payment transaction fees, and that's intended to align incentives across the solution with clients and your AP solution, right? So that we're hopefully helping you grow over time, both in terms of your company, but more importantly, the size of your business, right? And I think the last thing I'll say on that topic is it's important to have the transparency into how much each component costs, because that helps you manage your economics, your take rate. You can optimize the heck out of that with your vendors as well. So you're constantly making sort of 2 or 3 different layers of pricing decisions for yourself as well as for your solution. And that's where I think, again, Routable really cares a lot about that transparency. We want to be really, really open with all of the fees that we charge for different use cases, and try to educate as much as possible, why certain things might cost X versus Y.
Those are all great questions, and thanks for cost. Hey, Lauren, did you want to come on? You had a pretty good question.
Hey, Mike. Yeah, thanks. And thank you so much for sharing so much about Routable. This has been super interesting. So I'm also an investor. I work at Bowery Capital, and a lot of the B2B marketplace investments that I've invested in, they're actually more doing like wire-based transactions and not a ton on the credit card side of the house. So I guess I was just curious, how applicable is Routable when you're doing more wire ACH? And then kind of like the second part of that question was just around like the broader sort of fintech tech stack that you think you need in addition to Routable to kind of get started.
Two really great questions. So let me try to, Lauren, tackle each of them, and as much as I can. I think the topic around what is the broader ecosystem of fintech that we recommend kind of considering or evaluating, I think that's a bigger topic. I'm happy to connect you also with some folks on our team who have some of that research that they could maybe share with you as well.
Yeah, no, I would love to see it if you have it. Yeah,
for sure. And I think part of the thesis there, right, is that this is an ecosystem. We're seeing so many great fintech companies coming in with a very different perspective, maybe than some of the traditional solutions, and how these work together is something that I think is evolving. We do have a perspective. Happy to share some of that information as well. I think to your first question about sort of payment methods, what you'll typically find, and I'll give Routable's perspective, but I also want to give a broader take on different AP solutions out there. A lot of foundational payments are going to be typical sort of ACH, direct bank transfers or wires. And at a certain scale, particularly at early stages, that's going to probably capture the vast majority of a marketplace's business needs. It's just, being able to make payments relatively simply with our normal bank infrastructure. I think over time, what you start to find is that different sellers have different needs around how they want to be paid or how they expect to be paid. For example, when I joined Routable, I was actually surprised to find how much even just like paper checks is a big component for some of our companies in terms of paying their sellers. There are folks who are still maybe primarily traditional businesses who just need the check to come in at a certain time. When it comes to marketplaces, we're also, like I think I mentioned, sort of seeing a rise in, I don't want to call it alternative payment methods, but more demand for simpler payouts and faster payouts than our traditional bank wires might offer. So what does that mean? It means I'm a seller. I want to be paid in my PayPal balance, and that's what I use to facilitate all of my expenditures. Or maybe I'm more of a consumer, and so that's the most convenient thing for me. The payments are really, really fast. Or I want to be paid onto a debit card, right? That's a big need that we're starting to see emerge as well. And so from our perspective at Routable, we're continuing to add more and more options. So we facilitate bank transfers, check payments, cross-border payments. That's all part of our mix. We have real-time payments as well. And we're continuing to add and explore more and more of those alternative forms of payment as well, to provide that flexibility. And each of these payment methods have different trade-offs. Some are faster, some are more expensive, some are more transparent. So I think a key thing for us is also educating our users about those trade-offs so that they can make the choices that make sense for them.
So sorry, I just had one quick follow-up on like the cross-border element of it. I mean, how are you guys? Do you have a local presence in all these countries? Do you have a list of countries that you work with? Can you do all cross-border? Like, what's your flexibility there?
Yeah, I'm super passionate about this because my team directly is responsible for building out our cross-border payments product. We have a big part of our team that's continuing to build out, and we see an opportunity to build a really, really differentiated solution for cross-border. But where we are, so that's right. So what we support today, Lauren, is we support cross-border payments to all of the major countries like Canada, UK, all of the Eurozone. We're continuing to add more and more countries. Our goal is to be as global as possible, meaning we want to help facilitate our clients to make payments wherever they are in the world, right? And that is the direction that we're moving in. When it comes to how that works, it's also really important. I mentioned this briefly, but it's important to think about a couple of different aspects of that. One is around currency and currency conversions and managing of that. It does introduce a little bit of uncertainty, or maybe I would say it introduces a little bit of complexity that needs to be managed in the end-to-end process, right? Ultimately, your systems might be billing everything in US dollars, right? Just to keep things simple, you might want to reconcile everything in US dollars, but the payments to your vendors in different countries might be in local currency. So having, again, the transparency of how much money is being withdrawn from your bank account, when is that being converted, at what exchange rate that's being converted, and ultimately how much money landed in your vendor's bank account at the end of the day, that's a really important part of the solution that we're building. And again, comes from the spirit of, if we can provide that transparency, it enables marketplaces who are using us to make better business decisions and better user experience decisions for their payouts. So that is where we are today, and we're continuing. I'm just super excited, right? Like you think about just the potential of having the ability to automate cross-border payments at scale with transparency. That's something that we think is really exciting. And hopefully many of our marketplaces that we're working with who are expanding globally find that exciting too.
That's a great question. It looks like, hey, John, did that kind of help answer your question too? Because I know you posted in the chat about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think to a degree, I mean, it sounds a little bit like you're heading in a direction, but you don't have it all there yet, right? So we have very, very large dollar payments, tens of thousands of dollars in some cases, not high frequency. It's like once a month kind of thing for each of these payments, and we are cross border and cross currency. There's all these things there, and it seems like you've got a really interesting approach, but I think you're kind of moving in that direction. It doesn't sound from your answer that you have it already. You have kind of pieces of it, and you're kind of moving in that direction. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, John, I think when it comes to cross-border payments, we're basically in a position where we have a fully automatable solution right now to make payments to more than 50 countries in local currency. That all works today. Our clients, including our marketplace clients, are already using this today. All of the transparency that I was referring to around currency conversion rates and what that looks like, that's all built in today. And what we're doing right now is we're continuing to build more and more on top of that foundation. So we're planning to expand to all 200 countries. There's 230 or 240 countries in the world, depending on how you define a country, in the next month. So we believe we're pretty much there, but cross-border payments for us is a huge priority as a company as well. So happy to have a conversation as well, or follow up on any more information that we can provide.
Yeah, and I apologize because I had to step out in the middle for a little bit. So this next question, sorry if I could do a little follow on there, Mike, is are you planning on offering, or do you offer, I don't see it on the site, anything around escrow, prepayments, that kind of stuff that, because some of our transactions might be, the client is small, the vendor doesn't want to take a credit risk. They're going to go delivery for 6 months on a project and maybe get 2 or 3 of those payments in advance, but they don't want to be stuck with having done 6 months of work and gotten paid for 2. So they want that money in advance, but the little vendor doesn't want to put all that money, to some guy in the Ukraine in advance as well. So just kind of looking for if you have anything going in that direction.
100% aligned with where we want to go. And I think there's a similar question thematically, Natalia, from you as well, about the idea of financing and, how interconnected is the payout process to the checkout process. So I'll share a couple of things, John, but also be transparent. This is part of some of our forward-looking plans that I'm talking through, and we're still shaping them and kind of, I don't want to overpromise and say all of this exists or this is happening on the roadmap or what have you. But I would say for us, we do see this emerging need for more flexibility for our clients in how they can finance their payments. And in some cases, not necessarily tie that intimately or intricately to receivables or money coming in, right, or your checkout process. And so we're looking for all ways that we can provide flexibility there, including but not limited to financing. That isn't part of our current solution, John and Natalia, but it's something that we're continuing to explore, because I think the problem statement, as you framed it, John, was really good. Is just being able to provide that that flexibility and liquidity can really help in many cases jumpstart some of these businesses, and particularly marketplaces at certain stages might value that tremendously. Part of our plans, not what we offer today, but we see that opportunity and that problem as well. Does that help, John?
Well, we're almost out of time here. It's like actually kind of over. I did want to make sure. Hey, Zach, did you have a question? Want to jump on, or are we good?
Yeah, I had a real quick question.
Okay.
So
yeah,
I have a waste collection marketplace. Our supply side, they collect payments via cash and check. And so it's interesting to hear that you have a check solution. What would be your approach as it relates to we onboard them, and then basically we want to, basically take a small percent of every transaction that they create. So what would be your approach for, accepting check and cash until we can convert them to automatic?
That's a great question, Zach. Probably something that I'd like to follow up in a little bit more detail, because there's a couple of things specifically around cash that are a little bit more intricate. But check payments are actually very straightforward, both payments in, payments out. It's something that we can absolutely help with and facilitate. So that's
great.
Not something I would worry about too much. But I think that's Zach, it's a really great example of many businesses, for them being paid in a physical check is absolutely what they're looking for.
Yeah.
It's, they don't want to get it to fancy PayPal wallets or fun things like that, right? So yeah, for sure, we want to give that.
Great. I'll connect with you then.
Sounds good. Of course.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Wakas. This is a really great and informative workshop. So we appreciate taking the time to join us and share all of your awesome experience and kind of insights around payments, and also answer some of the questions and some of the tougher ones too. So thanks again. And thanks everyone for joining in here on the workshop today. And some of the questions here, which were also great. We got to dive into things. And I'll share the recording and a recap post and some notes and resources here in the community following.